Hey everybody, it's Josh. So in this video, I am going to cover Chapter 19 on the macroeconomic perspective. So let me load up what I've got for you guys. Here we go. So I'm going to be over here in the top corner. Hopefully I won't cover up anything on the screen. But yeah, today we're just going to get into the macroeconomic perspective. By the end of this video, you're going to have some pretty basic understanding of the macroeconomic goals, the frameworks, the policy tools that we use. You'll also get a clear grasp on GDP, how it measures the size of the economy, and some of the nuances that go into tracking economic health over time. So this is the agenda for this chapter. We have the introduction and then 5 sections: measuring the size of the economy with GDP, adjusting nominal values to real values, tracking real GDP over time, comparing GDP among countries, and how well GDP measures the well-being of society. So in this video, I'm just going to cover the introduction period. So macroeconomics steps back from individual markets and firms that we studied in microeconomics. Instead, macroeconomics examines the entire economy as a whole. Macroeconomic asks big questions like what causes recessions? Why does unemployment stay high even after a recession is over? Why do some countries experience rapid economic growth while others tend to struggle? So to answer these questions, we'll need to analyze the total demand and supply across all households and businesses in an economy. The relationship between microeconomics and macroeconomics can be complicated. Sometimes the actions of individuals and businesses in the microeconomy can have unintended consequences for the economy as a whole. For example, imagine that you're at a concert and everyone's sitting down and they're enjoying the show, and then suddenly the person in front of you stands up to get a better view. This forces you to stand up to get a better view, and then the person behind you, and so on. Soon, everyone is standing up, and no one has a better view than they did before. Similarly, what seems like a rational decision at the individual or firm level can lead to these problems for the entire economy. So that relationship is very complex and nuanced, and it's we use a lot of economic metrics to help us measure how one decision affects another. Okay. So to see macroeconomics in action, think back to the Great Depression. Here's a photo of people lining up for relief checks. I mean, this is a time when the U.S. economy is in severe distress. The Great Depression taught economists the importance of understanding these economic indicators like GDP and unemployment rates and inflation and many others. It also showed us why governments intervene during economic downturns. Studying macroeconomics helps us to understand and to respond to these kinds of economic patterns like recessions and depressions. Throughout the rest of this course, we'll be studying macroeconomics through 3 different lenses: goals, frameworks, and policy tools. So goals, what are the most important objectives that we want to achieve in the economy? Frameworks, what tools and models can economists use to understand how the macroeconomy works and how different events can affect key variables? And policy tools, what measures can the government take to try to influence the macroeconomy and steer it towards those goals? So let's talk a little bit more about these macroeconomic goals. One of the most important goals in macroeconomics is economic growth. Economic growth refers to an increase in the production of goods and services over time. Economic growth is important because it can lead to a higher standard of living for the population. Another key goal is low unemployment. When unemployment is high, it means that many people who want to work cannot find jobs. This can lead to financial hardship for individuals and families. It can also reduce the economy's overall output. Finally, we want to keep inflation low and stable. Inflation is this general increase in prices across the economy. And so when inflation is high, it erodes the purchasing power of people's incomes and savings. It makes it harder to afford things that you need. It affects people in different ways. Those who are on fixed incomes are particularly hurt. Those who have wealth are not so much hurt by it. A little bit of inflation's okay. And you can see some of the targets that we have here. A little bit of inflation, 1% to 2%, that's kind of what we want because it keeps things moving along. We don't want it to be excessive. Really, the 2% is the target. And economic growth, anything above 3% annually is positive. Unemployment, we like to have at 5% or less. Those are just benchmarks. They change, they go up and down as we respond to the economy and other things that are happening. But those are kind of like our best case scenario benchmarks of what we think a healthy economy is going to have. Okay. Now, when it comes to understanding and analyzing the macroeconomy, economists have developed a number of different frameworks. Two prominent perspectives are the neoclassical perspective and the Keynesian perspective. The neoclassical perspective tends to focus on the long run. Neoclassical economists generally believe that markets are efficient and that the economy will tend to self-correct over time without government interference. In contrast, the Keynesian perspective emphasizes short-run fluctuations in the economy. Keynesian economists argue that government intervention can be necessary to stabilize the economy during times of recession or high unemployment. So we're going to look at both of these later on. Personally, I'm more of a Keynesian person. I tend to think that government does have a role. I think there are market failures that only the government can step in to correct because the private market is just not going to do it, at least not in my lifetime. So personally, I'm more of a Keynesiast. Now, let's also finally just consider the policy tools that governments have at their disposal to influence the macroeconomy. One important tool is monetary policy. Monetary policy is conducted by the country's central bank, like in the United States, the Federal Reserve, or what we call the Fed. Monetary policy involves managing the money supply and interest rates to try to influence economic activity. The other major policy tool is fiscal policy. Fiscal policy refers to changes in government spending and taxes. So by adjusting spending and tax levels, the government can try to influence the overall level of demand in the economy. So if you're listening to a politician, if it's an election cycle, most of the time politicians, when they get up on stage, they're going to give you their policy positions and they're going to be referring to their fiscal policies. They want to end this spending or they want to increase this spending. They want to end this tax or increase this tax or change the structure of taxes. They're usually referring to things that they have control over. Congress has control over the purse. Politicians have control over spending and taxation policies at all levels of government. And so they're referring to the fiscal policy. They're not in control. Politicians are not in control of interest rates. And they're not in control of the money supply. That's the Federal Reserve. And there's kind of an invisible wall that separates those responsibilities. And that's something that we tend to think is a positive in our society. It's worked well for a long time to keep politics out of the monetary side. We don't like politicians influencing the interest rates. We tend to think that that's a little bit of an overreach. So it's good to have a non-political force overseeing part of our economy for just that long-term stability, because we know politics is not always stable. We switch from one party to another, back to the other, back to the other. Monetary policy is generally fairly stable. There's some targets we like to hit. There's tools at our disposal. It doesn't take someone to be voted for those tools to happen, those automatic stabilizers to come into play. Okay. So in the next video, We're going to start talking about the ways in which we measure economic performance using GDP, and that's going to then be the theme of the rest of these videos here in this chapter. That's where this one is going to end. Thank you all so much.